We are going to be recording this event, and first off, I'd just like to welcome you all, and really thank you all for attending our industrial cybersecurity webinar. Before we get started, also two other facts besides recording the event: we're going to be also answering questions via chat. So post any questions you have during the presentation in your chat window, and it'll either be answered via the chat or after during our Q&A when we open up the mics. Also, at the very end, we will be presenting a brief survey that if you could please fill it out for us to help us improve on this webinar and any other future webinar out there. So get going on this. Here's today's agenda. We're going to have the introduction of everyone that's going to be supporting this event. The first is myself. My name is Adrian Lapola. I work for OneSource Distributors. I've actually been OneSource Distributors senior network engineer starting back in 2009, but I've been in an IT senior level capacity for the past 28 years. I've worked in the airline industry, military, the education, the healthcare, and then more recently in the distribution with OneSource. Out of these 12 years that I've been spending with OneSource, the last 6, I've actually been leading our industrial networking and security division. So supporting all the Rockwell, Cisco, Panduit, and Claroty network and cybersecurity products that we have. The next presenter that we're going to be having is with Claroty. Anne?
Hi, and good morning, everybody. My name is Anne von Drak, and I manage the strategic relationship between Rockwell Automation and Claroty. My background is I spent about 25 years with Rockwell Automation, and I've been with Claroty for the last year and a half, focusing on OT cybersecurity and working across our organizations. So thanks for joining us today.
Next, we have Ryan.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Ryan Bowery with Claroty, Senior Solutions Engineer. Work alongside Anne, our sales directors here within Claroty, work supporting Rockwell and all of our partners and distributors of Rockwell as well. Grew up in the IT space, kind of organically shifted over into the OT space when there was a need for that. So many years as a customer, evaluating, scrutinizing, purchasing, implementing tools such as this and other Rockwell type tools. Shifted over. I did do some work for a distributor of Rockwell Automation here in Sarnia, Ontario, Canada. So I do have that knowledge of the limited distribution model. In addition to that, starting up the whole ASP services for that distributor as well. And now I'm over here with Claroty for the fact that I never had a tool such as Claroty in all my years experience working for many customers or companies that I've worked with as a customer that could automatically provide me this level of information in my OT network and give me that visibility down to all these assets. So very passionate about this product, which is one of the reasons why I'm here, and I'm very happy to have the opportunity to showcase this to you today.
Awesome. Thanks, Anne and Ryan. Next, we have with Rockwell, Joe.
Yeah, my name is Joe Agee. I'm a business development lead for our network and security services team. I've been with Rockwell since 2008.
Awesome. Perfect. So thanks for introductions. Once again, we're going to be leading off with Claroty, talking about evolving industrial cybersecurity, followed in with a Claroty demo, and then following up with Joe talking about Rockwell's network security and services. All right, so without further ado, we'll move on. And Anne, you want to take it away?
Great. Happy to. Hi, you guys. I'm happy to kick off today's presentation and get you more familiar initially with who Claroty is, because I know we're a relatively new company. You may not have seen our name before, so part of this is to make sure you have recognition of seeing who we are and why we're tied in with OneSource and Rockwell Automation. If you go to my next slide. Just part of that background is understanding the start of Claroty. We are still considered a startup organization. We just went through our Series D round of funding, and so you see some of our key investors are listed on the left-hand side. So we're happy again to have 3 of the key automation companies investing in us, and that was part of my draw to Claroty as an employee is seeing those 3 organizations all united together, backing Claroty is pretty powerful. Along with that is the key partnerships that we've been able to build across the years that we've been organized here, and that is the key automation investors. Then we look at our services organizations that we're tied to for that key delivery experience, and then the strategic integrations that we've been able to develop with some of the key organizations that you may already be doing business with in your organization. We were started out of Israel. However, our headquarters is in New York City. We were founded in 2015. Our relationship with Rockwell Automation began in about 2016. So very, very shortly after Claroty was founded, we started looking to build up that relationship with Rockwell. Since I started we've doubled the number of employees. So now we're over 200 employees within Claroty. Note too, I didn't point out that Team 8 is a venture capitalist company that started Claroty, and they've been the backers for a number of very key cybersecurity organizations. So if you look at where we are present, the fact that we are such a young company, but yet we're found globally is, I think, very impressive. We're in over 50 countries. And if you look across the verticals, we're present in a number of key verticals. But just to highlight some of the ones that we're very key in are obviously the regulated industries. But as we've been talking, and you'll see throughout this presentation, that increased need for OT cybersecurity is driving our presence into many more verticals than we were initially present in. So life sciences, chemical, gas, energy, those were some of the key industries where we started, but we're becoming more and more present in a number of other areas as well. So I also thought it would be important, and Joe Edgy will get into more detail on this moving forward, but I think it's important to understand how we fit into Rockwell Automation and our relationship there. So we're primarily present today with the Lifecycle Services team, and we are resold through the Network Services Group and through OneSource. So that is how you would access Claroty's offering. We are part of their entire journey of network services and solutions. We're not the entire piece of it. So, but as you'll look through the coming year, I think you'll see some great launches as we're looking to innovate and become more a part of Rockwell's offerings in the future. So you'll see us continuing to expand and find ways in which we can continue to be a more sticky part of Rockwell's solutions. So let's take a moment and talk a little bit about why are we seeing this increase in the need for OT cybersecurity. And so this is not just specific to Claroty. This is pretty much an industry-wide look at what we're seeing present in industry today. So if you look at the top part of this diagram, it's really focused on what you've typically found in the IT environment. And when you look at the bottom half, that has typically been the black curtain from a standpoint of not being visible to IT. The OT team really didn't want IT messing in their controls. And since I grew up in OT, that's the area where I'm most comfortable and have spent the majority of my career. So in that area, we know that there's typically a number of different proprietary protocols that may not easily present themselves to that IT space. There's a number of older systems, right? Things were built, Rockwell built everything to last forever. And so a lot of those systems are still present out there today. And then looking at the access privileges and security, naturally they wanted people to be able to access and support those systems so that they wouldn't have downtime. And at that point, they weren't worried about any intruders or people accessing the system with unauthorized security levels. But as we've been seeing with the IT and OT convergence, a lot of those IT capabilities that are now part of that OT environment are also lending itself to more of those threats and challenges that occur with the IT space. So now they're becoming more prevalent in the OT, and that's as we see the intensity and the frequency ramping up on challenges coming in with with cybersecurity threats in the OT space. If you go to the next slide. So, okay, there we go. So when you look at the Claroty platform, we set this up and it really steps you through pretty easily, because part of OT cybersecurity is making sure that we give you guys today a good look at what it is and remove some of the mystery around it so that you feel comfortable embarking on your OT cybersecurity journey. So looking at this initially, the first step is looking at how do we present the reveal capability to you. You can't protect what you can't see. So giving you that ultimate visibility into your network to know what assets you have in your network. Because the second step is once you know what assets you have, then looking at how are you going to protect them? How are you going to be aware and detect if there's any challenges hitting those areas? And then being able to connect into your system. This connection is could be done through our secure remote access offering. It also is an area where you can leverage some of your current tech stack as well, making sure that you're protecting and utilizing that infrastructure that you already have in place. And we'll talk coming up as to how we connect into that existing tech stack. Noting at the bottom all the different areas that play into this, all the different systems that need to be accounted for when you're looking at your OT cybersecurity, and making sure that as you build your cybersecurity infrastructure, that you can take into account all these different areas of your facilities, and making sure that you're continuing to optimize your IT and OT convergence while at the same time maintaining integrity and security in your system. That's what we look to present to you from Claroty. So if you look at how, as I mentioned before, we want to make sure that you're able to leverage your current tech stack, and at the same time, leveraging that tech stack and beginning your cybersecurity journey so that you can have clear access and visibility on your asset inventory and management, that you're able to have remote third-party access in a secure environment, that you can have continuous threat detection and vulnerability monitoring, that you're also able to have event and incident triage, as well as remediation. So that's why we've teamed up with all of the different labels that you see beside and continuing to add to them constantly so that you can have a great holistic solution. And what makes Claroty different? Because I'm sure you guys have seen there's a number of different people that are in this space. We have one of the deepest protocol libraries and one of the best visibility engines. So that is a key differentiator. Another piece of our differentiation is our research team. I have been super impressed by how Claroty's research team, it has a direct relationship with the product businesses at Rockwell Automation and some of our other key partners to make sure that as we discover vulnerabilities in their systems, we're working with them not only to give them awareness to it, but also helping them with the resolution so that ultimately we're all building a better and more secure offering for you, our customers. And then from a portfolio standpoint, we've continued to expand. You'll hear we've just recently launched in the last month our new Edge offering, which I encourage you to check into. But we have our continuous threat detection, which is our premier offering, and you're going to see that as Ryan shows it to you today. We also have secure remote access so that people can access the system appropriately and securely. And those are two of the other key offerings aside of Edge. And then we're continuing to work with Rockwell on our offering with them. Now, when you look at I always find that this is a key slide that helps remove, again, that another layer of mystery of what is OT cybersecurity, where is it, and how do I apply it to my particular system? And since we're used to looking at architecture diagrams, I think this really gives a good idea of how we're residing in that OT space. So you starting at level 4 being the highest and then working on down to the device level at level 0. So as you see, we have different areas pointing out the architecture from Claroty with our CTD sensors, moving up to the server that gives you that front end visibility. And then if you're aggregating multiple sites, taking it up to an EMC to centralize that information. So as we take a dive and look into how continuous threat detection works, Ryan will give you even tighter visibility into this architecture. With that, I'll
Awesome.
turn it over to Ryan.
Yep. Shelley?
Perfect, thank you. So just bear with me for a moment. I'm just setting up my screen to be shared. It is sharing now. Hopefully everyone is able to see my screen. Can everyone see that?
Yes, go ahead, Ryan.
Perfect, thank you. Just wanted confirmation because it's not like I've ever talked for 5 minutes without showing my screen when I thought I was. So I just wanted to get confirmation. Thank you for someone for confirming. So once again, thank you. It's my pleasure to show you what I'll refer to as CTD, continuous threat detection. As you know, Rockwell and anybody in IT, cybersecurity, OT, we love having acronyms. So of course, if I say any kind of an acronym that to me just comes off the top of my head, and you're unaware of it, please let me know, and I can explain what I'm talking about. I'll try to limit those as much as I can, or if I happen to use one, I'll try to backfill it with what it is. So what we are looking at here is Claroty's continuous threat detection, or CTD. We are looking at this right now from a single site perspective, where the software is deployed on premise at each site. When I say that it's deployed, we don't force you to buy any kind of an appliance or anything like that. We can be fully virtualized. We can run on, existing hardware, or you can purchase your own hardware. You can go through OneSource and, facilitate getting hardware through there. We're not a hardware company. We're a software cybersecurity solution. So I just want to make that clear. We do have, and based on the architecture that Anne had shared, we do have different systems in place here, where we have like our enterprise management console, or what we refer to as our EMC, which kind of gives you that, if you will, global perspective, or the holistic view of all the sites. So I'll just throw some random numbers out there. If we had 50 sites in our organization, we have 50 CTD servers deployed across all those sites. If we want our SOC or our security team to be able to look at that and get that holistic view, they would do that through our EMC. Our EMC sits more on the enterprise side, where the CTDs just push the information into those, once again, for that holistic view. So there's many different ways. We are very, flexible, very scalable. We go from very small to very large, and we can do that very quickly, which is also very important to know. And then, of course, building off some of those key areas that Anne was hitting on, when we talk about the reveal, the protect, the connect, etc. What we're really, and what I'm really going to show you today is I'm going to break those out a little bit. And I'm going to talk about, what's on my screen here. I'm going to talk about visibility. I'm going to steal, this is something that we use all the time, is where, we use that saying, you can't protect what you can't see. And that really is true. For the same saying, we have the other saying that we use all the time is, if we have physical access to a device, it's game over. But first and foremost is that gaining that visibility into these assets in that OT space, that typically we didn't have visibility to. So we'll talk about that. We're going to look at our vulnerability posture, which is really the risk, the vulnerabilities. This is really that total vulnerability or risk across your plant or your site. And of course, if we're looking at it from a global view, then it would be across your global facilities. And then, as we'll start talking about from a threat detection point of view, which is really going to give that ability in real time to identify existing threats in the environment. And this is what helps us be able to take action to remediate those issues. So
Ryan, before you get started here, we have a question. You're showing an Apple environment. Is this a Windows software solution? Is it platform agnostic? Could you speak to that briefly?
Sure. So the Claroty solution actually runs on what we call Claroty OS. Claroty OS is a Linux-based operating system with our Claroty platform running on it. So that's running on a server, whether that be a physical appliance, whether it be a VM, it doesn't really matter. And then to show you what I'm looking at here, I'm running it from a Mac, but it doesn't matter if you're running it from a Mac, if you're running it from a Windows-based, if you're running it from, I don't like it on phones. It's pretty small on phones, and I even have the Max Pro, and it's still very small, but iPad's not an issue. So it doesn't really matter which technology you're looking at this from. This is just a user interface, and it's just using a web browser. So Google Chrome or Microsoft Edge, and you can get in and get visibility to do this. The back end is Linux, of course. that answer your question?
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, not a problem. So, there's a couple things as we start looking into this. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the dashboards. I think we all understand, what dashboards are, what KPIs are. Obviously, they're very important. Obviously, we have them. And then each of those three areas I was talking about from a visibility and a risk standpoint, a threat standpoint, each one of these has their own areas that you can go into, start investigating further just on the visibility, on the risks, and then, of course, on the threats. These are all customizable. You can go in, you can add new widgets, you can change these around, you can edit this, you can create your own screens. You have all that flexibility. So it's a typical web interface where we give you that kind of that what you see is what you get. So you can play around with this and really make it your own. And that's really why I don't spend a lot of time in here, is just for the fact that I think we usually all have an understanding of what these areas are. And really what I want to do is get into kind of that meat and potatoes, if you will, getting us this information. And like I said, I do come from the customer side, and I've worked in these OT facilities, and I've worked alongside, plant managers and, control room operators and I&E technicians. And when I want to protect these is because it does come out of visibility. We can't protect what we can't see. How do we get that visibility? And when I was going and talking to these folks, it was always the same kind of questions and always the same kind of answers is, well, what do we have out here? And they're like, well, we don't really know. Well, how many assets do you have? Well, we think it's this many, but we don't know. Well, how many Rockwell devices? Well, we're not really sure. It's like, okay, well, let's start investigating this. And it was always a manual process. Some were really good and they would have Excel spreadsheets. Maybe they weren't updated for 2 years or so, but, we had those Excel spreadsheets. Other times, and she has a list in her desk on a piece of notepad that she's scribbled out, crossed things out and updated, but we don't always have access to that, and how up to date is that. So once again, this is one of the reasons why I was so passionate about this product, is because I never had this level of visibility into the OT side. On the IT side, we get visibility into our IT assets, our switches, our firewalls, all of our desktop computers. We have that at our fingertips. We've been doing that for many years. But OT's always been dark to the IT folks. We haven't gotten that types of visibility. So being able to get this information in safely and securely, and that's what we're doing. We're bringing this in passively. And what that means is we connect to a switch, and that switch, we're enabling something called span. That span is just taking a copy of all the information that's flowing through that network switch and bringing it out to a port where we plug in Claroty, and then Claroty takes over and it ingests all that information. We can't put anything back on the wire, so we're not injecting any more information back on the OT network, and that's why we're safe. So we're doing no harm. We're not going to bring down a system or plant or any lines or any operations at all. Once again, we're an OT company built from the ground up to work in OT. We're not an IT tool that was, shoehorned to fit into these OT environments. So that's very important to us, that people have the understanding that we are passive. We're going in. We do have other means of getting information where we can do, and I don't like the term, but we can do what we call active queries. I like to say at least they're safe queries, for the fact that when we run these queries, we're running them in the same native language that OT devices are running in. So if it's a PLC, it's a Rockwell PLC, it's going to communicate over SIP or Ethernet IP. We're going to construct our queries using that same language. So the same way that if you run RS links or if you run RS who, and it communicates to a PLC, that's the exact same way that we're communicating, because we have that knowledge of these devices. And of course, we have that working relationship, say with a Rockwell, that we're sitting in the research and development labs, they're in ours, and we're continuously talking and having those conversations to make sure that we get the best understanding of these assets. So everything that we're looking at today, and if I don't show anything that's here passively, I'll call it out and let you know that. But everything I'm going to show you right now is we brought into the system passively. So these are my assets. These are the asset names. We can see their IP addresses, their MAC address. That stuff's pretty standard, pretty common, pretty easy. But what we're going to do is we're going to start classifying these devices. Are these OT devices? Are they IT devices? Are they IoT devices, etc.? We're going to be able to determine, are these PLCs, are they HMIs, are they RTUs, are they endpoints, are they smart devices like smartwatches and iPads? Because we're going to recognize tools that aren't just really built for OT, the PLCs and RTUs and stuff like that. We're going to see the other devices that are on that network as well. So rogue switches and networking devices. We're going to see all of that information. We're going to put a type to them automatically because we know what these devices are. As well, we're going to assign a criticality to these. Of course, these criticalities can be changed, but we're going to take, the best, educated approach to this. We know, for instance, a PLC, that's a high criticality device. A PLC goes down, that's bad. That means a process is down, a line's down. Essentially, we're not making product, we're not making money. So we know that's a high criticality component. So we're going to assign that criticality automatically to it as high. We're also going to give these a risk level. Now, there is an algorithm that goes into this, and I can show you what that looks like, of course. One of the ways that we are calculating it is based on the criticality. So whether that device is high, medium, or low, that's going to be in that algorithm, which I'll show you. We are vendor agnostic, which is very important to understand. You'll see the Rockwell, Siemens, and Schneider, but it doesn't really matter if there's Dell, Cisco, HP, Yokogawa, whatever these devices are, we're going to be able to see and get visibility into these devices. And then more in building on this, this isn't the only information, which we're going to get into deeper, but this isn't the only information that you can see on the screen. One, you have all the filtering capabilities. So if you just want to see your OT devices, or maybe you want to just see, because we're talking about Rockwell here, we just want to see Rockwell, and maybe we just want to see PLCs. So very quickly, very easily, I can start filtering out and getting to the information that I want. And then I have the option where I can download this to a CSV file. I can schedule this as a report to go out every, Monday morning at 7 a.m. Here's where I could create a widget of this and put that on my dashboard. So now I have a widget and look at this every day when I come in. There's all kinds of differences that we can do. I can break out these and get rid of my filtering capabilities. If I wanted to see additional information here, I could add more columns. I could remove columns. I can sort by these columns. I can drag and drop. We have all these capabilities. And once again, I can import assets. I can export assets. The other things that we're doing automatically here, once we get this level of visibility, the other thing we're going to do is all automatically is build out the topology overview of where these assets are, how they're connected, and then we can take this and we can layer it over the Purdue model. If you're unfamiliar with the Purdue model, definitely talk to OneSource, talk to Rockwell, the NSS team. They know what this is. We live and breathe by this as they do. But essentially, this is helping our customers really start building out their micro segmentation projects. So getting down to that zero trust, if you will. We don't want devices crossing, level 0 devices talking up to this IT level. And this is going to show that of where these devices are, how they're connecting, how they're communicating. We can turn on the graphics like the animations and see the really flow of traffic. And once again, of course, you still have all these filtering capabilities that you can do in the system, at any time, in different areas, action items, all built into the web UI. Now, if I go back to my assets, I mentioned this isn't the only information you can see. I showed you could add some different columns, but what I want to do is I want to start going in, I want to start drilling into these assets and really start showing you the types of information we can see. So more than just the IP, the MAC address, the names of these devices, we're going to show a virtual zone, which I'll get into in a bit. We're going to show, the model, the serial number, the firmware of these devices. We're going to show the mode that it's running in. Building it out further, we're going to show the different protocols that we see. We're going to see if it's running on, this asset's running ARP and RDP, those IT type protocols. Those are pretty easy. We're going to show that. But now we're getting into those more I can't even say the word anymore. I've said it too many times today. Proprietary devices, the SIPs, the Ethernet IPs, and that's obviously Rockwell. If there was Modbus or, different types of protocols, we can see those. And we're going to show it here of what we see these devices communicating over. We're going to show the nested devices. We know there's nested devices down, those sub networks down below these PLCs. We're going to call those out. In fact, we're actually going to get down to the rack slots. So now we can actually show you the populated slots in that rack chassis. So that reading that backplane information. So now not only on the PLC are we going to give you the model, serial number, version, firmware versions, but all the communication cards that are populated in there. This all comes back down to that visibility, right? We need to be able to see this information to be able to start protecting, to detect these different things. So now on these communication cards, so the ENVTs, ENVT2s, whatever, device net, control net cards, whatever's in these, we're going to get you that information on these devices. And then, of course, right down to the actual code that's running on these. So these are the configurations on the device. Hugely differentiator for Claroty that we're able to get to this level through our deep packet inspection. But this becomes very, very important when we start looking and we're required to remediate issues, and which I can get into and show you where that becomes important when we're trying to remediate those issues. Of course, I've been showing you a lot on the assets, which is amazing. Now we have this level of visibility into these assets. And like I said, for a long time, I didn't have this visibility. Game changer for me as soon as I got this. I'm going to skip a couple tabs, but I'm going to go over to our network analytics because the DPI just doesn't cover that asset. Like I said, we actually cover the communication statistics behind this, those network or communication characteristics. I'll just leave it at that. But we'll show you the snaky graph of what this asset is, where it's talking, what protocols is it talking over, and what assets is it talking to. And of course, we can reverse this information. But then we're going to start breaking out these communication characteristics so we can see the amount of traffic that's going to this asset. And maybe even more importantly, we can start seeing the top assets that this device talks to. And then we'll break out those by the protocols as well. So now we're starting to understand those protocols. And this can be very helpful in understanding the type of traffic that each device is generating, and can be used to determine maybe there's a large amount of bandwidth usage from a particular protocol. So if you're troubleshooting a network, or if we look at Claroty as a whole, when we put the system in the beginning, we go into what we call a training, or otherwise known as a learning mode, if you will. And I like to say we're looking at the who, what, where, when, why, and how. We want to know what these assets are, who they are, where they are, who they're talking to, when they're talking to, how much traffic, how often do they communicate. We want to see all of that. So when we baseline all of that information, and then we move over to what we would say an operational mode, anything that deviates from that baseline, we can start alerting on and start notifying you to, this information is changing. So if I start talking about those protocols, if this is a normal baseline for, I'll just call it SIP at the top there. So if this is our normal behavior of information that's being sent over SIP, but then all of a sudden we see this spike and it's 100 megs of data or a gig of traffic being sent over SIP, we can alert you to that because that's not a normal baseline for these protocols. So it becomes very important when we start looking at that. And then if we break it down further into the communications, we start looking here. If we start looking at the actual baseline information here, we can see the different groups here. I won't get too much into the grouping yet. I will say this looks very much like firewall rules. We do have integrations with well-known next-gen firewalls that we can actually integrate to. So the Palo Altos, the checkpoints, the Cisco devices, etc. We can actually push these in. And if you wanted to, you could start having those devices take more of an active approach of quarantining or blocking communications if you wanted to. We don't do that in our system. We'll notify you of these, but we want to be safe for the OT environment. We don't want to take a chance of bringing something down. So we're just going to notify you of all the information. But I'll show you what that looks like in a virtual grouping of these zones. But if we start looking at this baseline information, so this is the actual baseline communications of the assets or the actual ICS messaging inside of those proprietary protocols. So the reads, the writes, the executes, all of those details. But the baseline of this is very important to us because when we're evaluating the accuracy of anomaly detection, of threat detection, and of course for those creation of these rules and policies, it becomes very important. And I'll show you what that looks like. I'm going to lay it out a little differently. Similar maps on that Purdue model, but this is our virtual groupings where Claroty, and once again, automatically we create this network map and we group these assets into these virtual zones based on the asset type, the communication behaviors, and the kind of protocols that they're using. So everything that I was kind of building up into and showing you this information, but it is our ability to group these assets in this way, which is very unique to Claroty. But this helps us drive anomaly detection because now we know how to flag policy violations as they go across these zones and between the assets. So if we baseline this as the information, and then we see this asset down here start talking to this asset and it never has before, we can alert you on that. Or if we see this as an asset down here start communicating up here to the internet level, we can call that out for you. So this is why it becomes important that we're able to and uniquely able to get this level of information for you so we can start helping you in detecting and alerting on these different areas. I'm going to go back into my assets for a minute. I'm going to go pick on one of these Rockwell devices again that I was already picking on, but I want to jump back to some of these pieces of information that I kind of skipped over before. So from a risk and vulnerability standpoint, first to note, Claroty automatically performs a vulnerability assessment on each and every asset using all of that data and all the deep packet inspection that we've already been looking at. So all of that's going through. We determine that risk level, and I mentioned that we automatically assign a risk level, and this one was high. And this is how we're actually creating that in our algorithm that's doing it. So we look at the criticality of that device. So whether it was high, medium, or low, the PLC that we're looking at was a high criticality device. So it's going to have a higher rating here. We're going to look to see if that device has any threats against it. We're going to look if the device has vulnerabilities. We're going to look to see if how infectable is that device. And we're going to look to see how accessible that device is. And then we're going to build out that risk score or the risk level. We're going to assign a risk score to it with all of our KPIs to show you exactly how we've calculated it. So each area, all weighted, all broken down into these areas, building out that total risk level and risk score for you. The other things that we're doing is from a vulnerability standpoint which is going into that algorithm as well, is what we call these full match CVEs. Not 100% sure if everyone's familiar with CVEs. High level overview stands for common vulnerability exposures. And what happens if, and let's say, because unfortunately it does happen to Rockwell every now and then as well, and it happens to every vendor. If we, somebody, even Claroty, we find vulnerabilities in systems all the time, or if a bad actor finds a vulnerability, we're alerted to that vulnerability. Rockwell is going to publish a CVE. That goes out on their website. There's other websites, and Claroty uses it, not only Rockwell's website, but we use US Cert, IS Cert, all these other sources of these CVEs, and we go and collect all this information. So when we look at CVE, typically what's going to happen is if you have a vendor and a model of a device, that is going to basically say you have this vulnerability. But that's not 100% true all the time. And the reason for that is if you look further into those, and let's say it's a Rockwell CVE, it's going to say, yes, it's Rockwell Automation devices, it's this model. However, only devices with this firmware version are affected by it. So Claroty uniquely goes through and we look at those CVEs, and then we match your firmware version of your asset to the CVE informational page. So when we say full match, we're saying 100% you have this vulnerability on that asset, or really it boils down to 0 false positives, which we really want to get at. I've worked in, like I said, on that OT side for many, many years in many big facilities. And I'm going around and we were looking into these. We look at the vulnerabilities. We go to the web pages. It was all manual once again. So we went down to them. We'd look for them. What firmware version? Then it's like, oh, well, this one doesn't even have that firmware version, so we're not affected. I just wasted my time, my money, all my efforts went to waste. And that's why it's very important to understand, differently than other people out there that are just providing you with vulnerabilities or CVEs, is that we're doing that full match, which is obviously very important. All this, information in here is, you can drill it down. So now you can see, maybe this one wasn't the best one, but you can see the different, pieces of information here. And I'll show you what it looks like from another screen under what we call our insights. So our insights is the ability to group these into that kind of to-do list of information in here. So it's going to show you, when you ask the question, well, that's great. You can show me these, 100% visibility across the board of what I have, and you can show me my vulnerabilities and my risks and my threats, which I'll get into next, I promise. But this is that to-do list of what you can actually do to start improving your hygiene score, or what you can do to start reducing your threat hygiene score. You can see, maybe you want to look at these 6 assets that are communicating with 5 external IPs. Probably not the best thing. Maybe we want to look at these 6 assets that are using 3 unsecured protocols. And then we can drill into those, and now we can see those 3 unsecured protocols, what they mean, and then we can see which assets are actually using those unsecured protocols. So on this one, FTP, we can see 3 assets are using it. We can drill in further. Now I can see the 3 assets that are using those unsecured protocols. I can click them and get further insights into the actual assets themselves. So very granular, very easy, but this is really helping you start increasing your hygiene score right from day one as we're building this out. This is all automatic. You don't have to do any effort to put this information in there. It's all happening in the background. Just easy, kind of put it in place, and it's going to do all the automatic stuff in the background for you. Of course, you still have all your filtering capabilities and the exporting capabilities, all of that great stuff. But I am going to go and I'm going to move into the threats quickly, because I really want to show you, what this looks like as well. So what we're showing here is a collection of alerts, which Claroty has uniquely grouped into what we call stories. And a story is actually a collection of all the related events and all the related alerts. But it's hugely differentiated for Claroty, because when we're looking into identify root cause, we really have to see the whole chain of events. We also need to understand the full context of the alert, because this info becomes key in helping people like us remediate these issues. Instead of just a huge laundry list of unrelated events, think of a typical SIM. If you don't know what a SIM is, it's just a collection of everything that's happening in the system. Usually it's going to be hundreds, if not thousands of lines of information in here that somebody has to spend time, money, effort to go through and sort through. Claroty has done it differently. We've taken that approach where it's automatic. We've done all the correlation of all this for you. So in this one, we took those 2 alerts and we put them into this story. First, we can see, why did we raise this alert in the first place? And then what does this mean? Because we do have many different personas that are actually looking into this. So if we're looking into it from an IT or a SOC perspective, we need to be able to understand what's happening. If we're looking at it from an OT perspective, once again, we need to know what's happening. We're going to assign alert scores, and the severities to this. We're going to show you the significant indicators, why we raised this in the first place. But then we're actually going to show all the indicators. This is really that detailed rationale behind the alert in the first place. This is how we actually calculate the score. Vendors don't typically give you this information, this level of detail, or the actual scoring of the alert. But to us, this is your information. This is how you're going to make decisions of what needs to happen within your environment. This is your data. We need to give it to you. So we're going to spell it all out for you so you can see it right in front of you. As we start going down this whole incident that's happened, if we start looking at the root cause analysis, so this is the actual chain of events that comprise the story. So we're going to show it to you in a graphical form, which you can animate, of course, but then we're going to break down each step that was taken. So in this case, we can see that a host scan was performed. Then we can see from a baseline deviation that an external asset connected to this asset using RDP, which resulted in configuration downloads. We start going further. We're going to provide you the mitigating steps of, these are the steps that we would think that you're going to want to take to mitigate this. We're going to show you the actual assets that were involved. So this is the potential bad actor. This was the device that had the download or was potentially compromised. And then I mentioned there was 2 alerts, but we correlate all the events as well. So we've pieced together in one single pane of glass all the events in here as well. So there's 11 pages of information that have happened during this alert, during this potential compromise of a system of what was happening. And then, of course, where it really gets important as well, I mentioned of when we start looking into identifying threats and changes, this is what we're seeing here. So we can actually see the actual code change that resulted in the alert. So a lot of these we can see didn't change, this one changed. We could look at the new config, we could look at the old config, or we can just say, show me the line of code that changed of why you raised this alert. And then we can show you, I don't know what happens if step or 2 went from 200 to 1, but if I picked up the phone and called an OT person that's responsible for this, they're going to be able to tell me, is that a chemical upset? Is it a line going down, a process going down? Is it a health issue or a health and safety issue? They could probably explain exactly what that means, or it could start the investigation to see exactly what that means. So lots of things in there. Other things that we're able to do as well, obviously we have everything in here from an OT audit perspective. My demo environment doesn't have the best stuff in here, but we could see, online edits and new assets and mode changes, host scans and config uploads and downloads. We can see the different baselines and protocols and network sessions. But from an OT perspective, now we can start seeing this different process information. So kind of that tag level data. So we can see the tag information, the min, the max, the averages. We can see those values over time as we're going through this. if we build it out this way, we can see this. So now we can start recording this information and putting it as part of the baseline. So if we start seeing deviations of this information, we can start alerting on it. That's how granular of visibility, clarity, this type of tool provides for you. We have all the reporting capability, a bunch of canned reports. I won't get into every single one of them right now. There's many different areas that we can get into if we start looking into, how are we actually going about and getting this information? How can we detect, threats and, different things in the first place? And that we're doing that through our YARA rules and our network signatures. Really, I could get into exactly what it stands. Well, I like YARA. I'll tell you what YARA is because I love this acronym. It really is what it stands for is yet another ridiculous acronym. To me, that's the best acronym that's out there. But really what this is, Claroty uses our YARA rules for detecting zero-day malware. For example, Claroty built a rule for Triton, if you've heard of Triton, which is a piece of malware. But in order for YARA rules to work, you have to be able to inspect the actual code on the PLC. And once again, that's where Claroty is unique. Our network signatures, or AKA snort rules, they're specifically designed to detect known exploits. So these are distinct from malware in the YARA, but these are known exploits against vulnerabilities that I was showing you. We detect those vulnerabilities. We know there's some exploits for them, so we're going to build this out to be able to detect those exploits as well. So a couple different key areas there. There's tons of different areas that we could show you about the Claroty system. I could spend hours and hours or days talking about this solution. There's so much in it, but at the same time, it is easy to use because you don't need to get into the high end or the back end technical details. We've done that work. We have very, very smart research and development team, like they're genius level in my opinion, and they're coming up with this to make it as easy and flexible and scalable as possible. And that just builds onto this where you can have local, users and information in here. We can tie into existing Active Directory if you have AD set up in these environments. We can tie into existing SIMs. If you have SIMs, maybe it's an IT SIM and you want to put this information over to like a IBM QRadar or a Splunk or, something like that. And if it's not listed here, it's in set format, which is typical SIM ingestion that we can send to any SIM. From a third party, I did mention some of these names already, but we have the easy buttons here for integrating to these different technology stacks. So the Arubas and the Apollos, Cisco's, FortiGate, checkpoints, even ServiceNow for the CMDB side of things. CrowdStrike for endpoint protection. And of course, this isn't everything. These are just, like I said, the easy buttons, the ones that we've worked with in the past a lot. And then, we do have open API explorers, that we can integrate to pretty much anything if we don't have it in part of our easy buttons. I'm going to pause just for a quick second. I just want to see if there was any questions. When I go through, like I said, I'm very passionate about this product. And I don't think I took a breath once. So I want to make sure if there was any questions that, we do get some time in here to answer questions as well. If I need to pass the floor back, I mentioned before, I will talk about this for hours and hours and days on end about it. So I'll take a moment.
It doesn't look like there are any questions in the queue. We can save the rest for after. This might be a good segue to get into the Rockwell presentation, but this is a terrific tool. Thank you for the great insight. Once again, this is, as you can see, this is an OT-centric tool. It's developed for the OT environment, not retrofitting an IT tool into the OT environment. So if anyone's interested, we would love to start up future conversations and extend this beyond this one webinar. So with that being said, I'll take the baton back. Thank you, Ryan. That was terrific.
No problem.
All right. I'll share up my screen and then we'll go ahead and let Joe kick in. And then any questions you guys have after, we will open up the floor for questions. Joe?
Thanks, Adrian. I'll wait till the presentation comes up. I'm not seeing it yet. There we go. So today's webinar has been focused on Claroty's continuous threat detection solution, but I want to focus on the broader cybersecurity solution. There's a saying in cybersecurity, there's no such thing as a silver bullet. So Claroty CTD is a great point solution, but it's just a component in a broader cybersecurity strategy. I want to start by reviewing the threat landscape for ICS security, and it is changing rapidly. We all know about Stuxnet and the Ukrainian power grid attacks back in the mid 2015, 2016. And clearly with these attacks like Ukraine, without a remarkable response, some red lines in the sand have been crossed. But nation states are not the only threat actors these days. Terrorists can buy or rent the skills, infrastructure, and tools to launch effective attacks now. Cyber criminals can use ransomware to hold our production hostage. We're hearing a lot of those stories on the news as of late. A recent article talked about a ransom for hire, creating custom ransomware campaigns to target a single organization with significant downtime cost who might be more willing to pay a ransom. Cyber criminals are increasingly selling their services and skills, code and toolkits, and even some open source malware, which can be repurposed. Activists seek to do damage to entities they don't like using previously mentioned resources, and insiders remain a pervasive risk. Back in 2017, WannaCry and NotPetya proved that even threats not specifically targeting ICS can have an impact on industrial networks, and that weapons-grade malware is available for less sophisticated actors to use. The sky's not falling, but the risk equation has changed recently, and industrial asset owners and operators are paying attention. As you can see from this slide, these are some ICS focus campaigns, and in the bottom, it shows the frequency of those. As you can see, they continue to increase, and I would say since 2017, at even a faster pace. The two Ukrainian incidents in 2015 and 2016, I mentioned briefly earlier, were directly targeting electrical generation assets and included ICS protocols and knowledge. WannaCry was more of a general attack, but did have impacts on ICS. Next slide, Adrian. So there are real costs to cyber attacks. In 2017, things changed dramatically when NotPetya got out into the wild. There's a group that's basically the offensive cyber division for Russia when we talk about state actors, called the GRU. And in 2015 and again in 2016, they specifically targeted Ukraine and the power grid during the winters of 15 and 16. In 2017, they wanted to do even more broad harm, but they wanted to focus specifically on Ukraine. So back in, I think, 2015, the NSA got hacked and some of their hacking tools got out on the black market. And actually the GRU took advantage of some of those. They were 0 days that they had never acknowledged. And they created this virus called NotPetya. Well, the thought process was, how can we just target Ukraine? So they put the payload on a small software company's update server. It's basically TurboTax for Ukrainians. So that way they could just hit Ukrainian companies. And it was ransomware, and they never intended to unlock it because they were trying to do damage. The problem was they didn't think about, well, what if there's a multinational company that has an office in the Ukraine? And that's exactly what happened. And so NotPetya, for companies that had an office in Ukraine and other places around the world, it spread very rapidly and did tremendous amounts of damage to a lot of our customers. As you can see from this slide, it cost Merck Pharmaceutical $870 million to recover. TNT Express, which is a subsidiary of FedEx, $400 million. Saint-Gobain, which is a glass manufacturer, $384 million. And then over on the right, you can see Maersk, that's the container ship company, cost them over $300 million. I was reading a book about NotPetya and what happened to Maersk. And just to give you an idea how fast this can happen, the virus started spreading through Maersk network, and within a matter of minutes, it took down over 49,000 PCs and 4,000 servers, and they were never able to recover those. So you think about what happens after that. There are ships at sea, and they don't know what's in the containers, so they can't come into port, and there's trucks wanting to come into port, and they don't know what's on the trucks. So it took them down hard for a couple of weeks. It took them months to recover. And all these dollars, I think there was $11 billion in direct costs, but all the ripple costs to supply chain and everything else that comes out of this is just enormous. Next slide, please. And if you'll click one more time, this is a build slide. There you go. So in cybersecurity, there's a saying, as I've mentioned earlier, there's no silver bullet that can protect your organization, but it's a series of solutions that work together in a defense in depth strategy. Therefore, I'm going to talk about the broader cybersecurity landscape in a few minutes. In the few minutes I have here today. As a level set, this slide shows industry standards bodies that define industry best practices in regard to overall cybersecurity posture. There's a common thread between all the cybersecurity organizations, as you can see, concept of defense in depth, segmentation, and the proper establishment of an IDMZ. And I want to point out here that if you want to implement any type of cybersecurity continuous threat detection solution, it is just that one component of the overall cybersecurity program that includes a well-designed network infrastructure, IDMZ, and the use of defense in depth principles that I'll highlight in a future slide. Next slide, please. Ryan briefly mentioned the Purdue reference model, and I just want to explain some terminology here so we're all talking the same language. It's laid out in levels 0 through 5, and on the left, those are levels corresponding to the Purdue reference model, as well as security zones on the right as defined by the standards organizations such as IEC, NIST, and ICS CERT. I'm going to ensure everyone understands the terminology I'm using. When you hear me refer to IT versus OT, I'm referring to the enterprise security zone versus the industrial security zone shown on the right hand of the slide. If you'll remember from the previous slide, we talked about defense in depth segmentation and the use of IDMZ. As you can see here, the IDMZ is shown as the boundary between IT security zone and OT security zone. And the purpose of the IDMZ is to provide secure communications between the two security zones by inspecting traffic entering and exiting the IDMZ. It also acts as a logical disconnect point in case there's a cyber incident in either zone, and you can buffer information in case of a disconnect, so it allows you to continue to operate your plant for some defined period of time. When we talk about segmentation, we're referring to both segmentation between IT and OT through the use of an IDMZ, but also micro-segmentation at the cell area level in the OT zone for the purpose of creating broadcast security and fault domains. Next slide, please. Rockwell Automation created an alliance partnership with Cisco back in the mid-2000s, and the purpose was to provide customers with design guidance, joint product development like our Stratix line of switches, and education to our customers. And from that partnership, we've developed tested, validated, and documented reference architectures that address several implementation scenarios, such as converged plant-wide Ethernet, deploying industrial firewalls, deploying physical infrastructure, REP, wireless real-time, deploying that, and many others. I think there's 18 or 20 reference architecture guides now, and those are all available for free download on our website, by the way. Next slide, Adrian. And this is a build slide as well. If you'll build that out, 2 more clicks, I think. There you go. So, I was talking about defense in depth. This slide shows all the different areas where defense in depth can be applied across the OT network. And the concept of defense in depth really comes from the military. And the intent is to provide layers of defense, knowing you can't stop an attacker, but through layered defenses, you can slow the attacker down in order to give you time to stop them before they can, for example, cause physical damage, steal intellectual property, etc. And this is just showing things that control engineers can do by themselves, maybe control engineers in collaboration with IT, and then some of the higher end stuff that is really focused around IT security architects and things like that. And next slide, and I think this is my last slide. I like this slide because it illustrates really what network and security services can provide to our customers, but that also illustrates how all these services play a role in an overall cybersecurity solution. I'll start on the left-hand side of the slide under Build a Foundation. NSS, or Network Services, can provide network assessments as well as comprehensive network designs. And the purpose of the network assessment is to evaluate an existing network infrastructure against industry best practices and provide remediation advice on how to bring the current network up to industry best practices. A comprehensive network design provides a detailed, logical, and physical modern network design architecture, all based on converged plant-wide Ethernet design guides. In regards to deploy, manage, and monitor the infrastructure, NSS can provide a complete turnkey network implementation of both the physical and the logical network infrastructure. And once the network's been installed, we can offer a 24/7 by 365 remote monitoring administration service where we provide a 10-minute service level agreement in response to any critical alarms. And our average response time is usually about 3 minutes. And this is critical to minimizing downtime in an OT environment. And that was really launched as a request from our customers, that a lot of them had their OT networks outsourced to IT firms, and they were offering 4-hour service level agreements, which is just not, you just can't do that in OT. Next is our pre-engineered industrial data center. We call it the IDC, is a tested and validated hyper-converged virtualized compute environment, complete with all the compute, storage, and switching to support your OT applications. Also, the IDC is built to an N+1 redundancy, so no single point of failure will bring the compute environment down. You simply supply us with the workloads you need to run in your OT environment. We'll size the IDC, assemble it off-site, and ship it to your facility, send a smart guy to stand it up. We also offer the same remote monitoring service for the IDC that we do the network. And you may be asking yourself, how does a IDC help with your cybersecurity posture? Well, by housing all your applications in one place and taking advantage of things like thin client technology, you can greatly reduce your attack surface in your facility. And by using thin clients, you don't have to worry about, OS patching and antivirus patching of a bunch of white boxes out on the floor. This webinar has been focused on the Claroty Continuous Threat Detection product, and NSS, as Ann said, is partnered with Claroty to deliver turnkey implementation services for their CTD solution. I saw an announcement, or I think earlier this month, that Rockwell was voted a global partner for Claroty in 2020. In addition to implementing CTD, we also offer monthly tuning service for the CTD solution to ensure only the most valuable and pertinent information is being presented to the end customer, to ensure that you don't suffer from alert fatigue due to nuisance alerts. And then later this year, we're also offering a remote monitoring service to respond to customer alerts in real time on a 24/7 by 365 basis. And this is basically an industrial security operations center. In addition to the Claroty CTD solution, we also implement their secure remote access solution as well. We mentioned the IDMZ earlier, and NSS can also provide IDMZ design and implementation services for IDMZ, as well as remotely monitor and administer IDMZ, just like all of the other products. And then last, we also offer a patch management service, patch known vulnerabilities with your industrial control system environment. And I had 10 minutes. I went 4 minutes over. I apologize, but that's all I've got, Adrian.
Awesome. Thank you, Joe. Yeah, sorry, everyone. We ran a little bit over, so I'm going to move on to the next slide. But yeah, terrific information. So just a reminder, all attendees that are here, we've noted your name. You're all offered 30% off an ASP security posture survey. Due to time, we don't have enough time to go into the details about ASP, SPS, but we'll reach out to you. We'll have further discussions on it. And just to get out to the winner of the free ASP, SPS is, drum roll, Moulton Niguel Water District. So we will follow up with you after this presentation due to time, but if anyone's still on the line and would like to ask any questions, please put a quick note into the chat. We will unmute your mic and then you can ask your questions to the panel. If there are no questions, thank you for attending. We really appreciate your time. Look forward to helping you out in your cybersecurity posture moving forward. Any questions that you have at all around industrial cybersecurity, please reach out to anyone here at OneSource, myself specifically, and then we can further those conversations. Are there any questions in the queue, Martin?
I don't see anything that hasn't been answered.
Awesome. All right. Once again, thank you, everybody. We really appreciate your attendance. Thank you, Ann, Ryan from Claroty, and Joe from Rockwell. We enjoy the partnership that we have and hopefully strengthen our customers' security posture moving forward. Have a good rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.